start by just making a third-person project in Unreal Engine. I'm using 5.1.1, but you can use 5.0 or 5.1, whichever. It should work the same. And I'm gonna call it crap. I didn't think about the naming difficulty. Okay, I'm gonna say Code Workshop. You don't have to name it the same thing, but that's what I'm naming it. And it's gonna be a C++ project, and target platform desktop quality preset, scalable or maximum, up to you. I don't know if it makes that much of a difference. Not really sure. Starter content, I won't be using any. You can add it if you want, though. And then ray tracing, I cannot ray trace. So, then I'm just going to create. And the workshop form was sent out in Discord if any of you need to refer to that at any point in case I go too fast. And if I go too fast, just raise your hand and let me know. Yeah, I have all the games I've made on my desktop. No. I don't have my logo sorted for a single screen, just a double screen, so they're all mixed right now.
You play Bioshock?
Huh? Yeah.
You play Bioshock?
I am in halfway through it.
Oh, okay.
Did you say another reason for
It's up to you. I'm not, because I'm not going to be using any of it, but you can if you want to.
It does take up an extra 3 gigabytes or something.
Yeah, it does take up an extra bit of space.
quality preset?
I just have mine at maximum. Alright. And then you open Unreal Engine. Well, simply get good. The response time on mine, I'm surprised is not slower because I'm currently streaming my desktop and then streaming my desktop. Alright, let me know when everyone has Unreal Engine open.
I'm gonna be a while because
I'm glad Twitch is working. Jack and Jack, how are y'all doing?
What?
I meant in terms of opening Unreal Engine.
Epic Games
Mhm.
does not want to open its app.
Mhm. You can also just search Unreal Engine and open it that way.
It doesn't. It hasn't been working that way.
Really?
No, you do not use the Epic Games launcher to launch Unreal. It's not letting me open it when I look it up. It's not even installed.
I like how we grouped everyone who is covering their laptop with stickers in that section of the room. Because no one else has stickers. You have stickers on the inside? Yeah. I put mine upside down on mine so that I can see them when it's closed. Yeah, but when it's closed, it's right side up for me. No, I don't want other people to see my stickers. They're just for me. And I never see the backside of my laptop. And alright. Elliot, Haley, how are y'all doing? Okay.
It's telling me to install Visual Okay, so I'm doing
Has anyone opened Unreal Engine yet? I think has it open? I think I'm a wait, Yeah.
I can't remove that without creating a process.
Okay, so what are you talking about?
I can't set which ID until I get into the actual scene.
I'm coming.
Alright. Jack and Jack, y'all got it open? Well, no, it's just I would be solely teaching to Elliot right now. Yes, thank you. That's true. Alright, well anyways, I will now leave everyone else behind. Because that is what you deserve. Alright, so you're downloading Unreal Engine. Alright. Let me see, what else did I do? Alright, first thing first, I'm going to set up my folders. So I'm going to create a new folder by right-clicking in Content and then scrolling up to Folder and call it Maps. I love the delay on this. This is going to make coding so much fun. Maps. Yeah. Well, the thing is, Unreal Engine I don't think has a scaling for the UI. Yeah. I think he just scaled everything up and then it looked really bad. Alright. And then another folder called Blueprints. Yeah, changing it up, huh? What? Well, you make blueprints to do the visuals of C++. Yeah. And then another folder called Input. Because Unreal Engine has a new input system, which I will be using. And then in the Input folder, I will create another folder. And this one will be, wow, this is Actions. Alright, so now we have the new folders, Blueprints, Maps, Input, and then Actions within Input. Alright. Now we're going to create a new scene to do work in. Maybe. Alright. So if you go up to File, and then wait a minute, because it's slow. Well, are you double streaming yours? File, oh my gosh. Okay, File, New Level, and then Basic, because we're not doing no fancy open world. And you should have a new basic level with like lighting and stuff set up. And then we're just going to save the level by hitting Control S and then put it in Maps. And I'm going to call mine Starter Map. That's not how you spell Starter. Starter Map. Alright. Now that we have this, I'm going to change the default maps for the game. So Edit, Project Settings, and then Maps and Modes. Are the people who are following along at this point? Okay. And then we're going to do drop down for both the maps and change them to the map you just created, which I called Starter Map. And then just close that. Alright, and now that there's no more references to the third-person game content, we're going to delete the third-person game content, because, you know, we can do it better. So we're going to go to Content, the Content folder, and then click Third Person, and just hit Delete. Once it loads. Once one. Yeah. If it says that there's any asset references, do not force delete or your code will break. Well, it'll like very clearly tell you. So since mine is being very slow, we're just going to wait a minute. Oh, there we go. And force delete. Because we don't need that, you know? And we'll do it better. We won't, but we say we will. And the stuff we need, the reason I made it a third-person project is because I just wanted the animations and the skeleton, which are not in that folder. So we can just delete it. So, now we're going to go into, trying to remember what I did next. Input. We're going to create our input actions. Still a little slow. Alright, I'm going to disconnect and then reconnect real quick. Okay. Hopefully it goes faster. So in input and then actions, we're going to right click and do go to input and then input action. This is the new Unreal Engine input system. The old one, you just created input action and like named it something. This one, we create input objects, well, input actions, and then reference those directly in code. So you don't have to worry about anymore if you got the naming right. So we're going to create an input action, and the naming convention is IA underscore, and then this will be move. And then we're going to make ones for look and jump. If I can. Okay, there we go. Alright. So now you should have IA jump, IA look, and IA move in the input, and then actions folder. Alright. And then just if you see a star, it means it's not saved. So if you just click it and hit Control S, it'll save it. And so that's what I'm just going to do real quick. Except it apparently hates me, so it's not going to do that. Anyways, now we're going to open IA move in a minute, apparently. Alright. And it should open a new window. If you want, you can just drag it and it'll sit back on the original Unreal Engine. And then the only thing we're changing on here is the value type. That is what type of input it is. So like if you're jumping, it's a single space. You don't need to read any input. If you're moving like just forward and backward, that is an axis, and then moving forward directions is a axis 2D. So we're going to want a value type and change it to axis 2D or vector 2D. Is that a mocap suit?
Yeah.
Where'd y'all get a mocap suit? You just have a mocap suit? Alright, so then we're going to go back and do this for IA look as well, because look will be a axis 2D, and make sure to save as well. Alright. And then for the IA jump, that will just be digital, so a boolean. It's either you're jumping or you're not. You're not like jumping a little bit or jumping like whatever. It's just jump. So does everyone have those three input actions set up? Alright, now we're going to go back to the input folder and create next to the actions folder, we're going to create an input mapping context. So right-click Input and then Input Mapping Context. This will be IMC default. So input mapping contexts are basically, they limit what type of actions you can do at any point. So say you're just running around, right? But you don't want to like punch while you're running around. Then you have an input mapping context for your running around, and you have an input mapping context for your combat. One has the punch ability and the other does not. And you can change the input mapping context for the player so that you can have certain actions be called. But this one, we're not doing anything fancy like that. We're just having one mapping context with everything in it. This is also where you define the key inputs. And it gets a little complicated. So if you open the input mapping context, you'll see mappings and then description. We're not going to add a description. Because no. It may be helpful to add descriptions if you want to have comments on everything, but we're not going to. So what we'll do is hit the plus next to mappings, and this will add a new input action to the list of mappings. And then there's a drop down that appears, and from this drop down we're going to choose IA jump. So this means we're setting up the jump action. And yeah.
You could do it in the editor settings too.
How do I turn
In the editor settings, you could just find scaling, set it like 150%.
Then we're on your laptop, we need
Let me just go to Windows settings. I don't know how to do it. Alright. How do I do it in Windows settings? Oh, display. How's that? Alright. So, in IMC default, we added a new mapping and then made that IA jump. Now, you'll see the little key value here, the little keyboard, and if you press it and then press spacebar, it'll map the spacebar to the jump action. So that now spacebar will make you jump. Well, of course, we haven't set up that functionality, but that decides what key we use. Next, we're going to do the same for IA move, but slightly different. This gets slightly more complicated. So IA move, we want 4 different possible inputs for moving around. We have W, and then hit plus next to IA move to add another. S, A, and D. Now we have the 4 inputs we need for IA move. But we need to add modifiers to make them do what we want them to do. So this is where it can get a little weird. The first modifier we want to add is called Swizzle Input Access Values. I don't know why it called that, but you want to do Swizzle Input Access Values, then the dropdown you want it to be Y, X, Z. This just means instead of being horizontal, it's vertical. And so W will now move you forward. And then for S, we want to do the same thing. So swizzle input access values and make sure it's WXZ. I mean YXZ, not W. But the thing is, S wants to move backwards, so it has to be the opposite of forwards. So we're going to want to add another modifier called negate. This will make sure it's negative. And then we're going to uncheck everything except for the Y value, so that it only affects the Y. Well, only, yeah. And so, does everyone have the W and S inputs? Alright. Then, for A and D, it's a little simpler. We don't have to swizzle any inputs here. Just one of them has to be negated. And that will be A. We're going to want to do A, and then negate, and then just the X, rather than X, Y, Z. I believe. Let me make sure. Okay, only X checked for the negate for A. And then D we can just leave as is. So, does everyone have a IA move set up? Okay. Nicholas, you good? Alright, cool. Now, we set up IA look. So, add another mapping and choose IA underscore look. This one is a bit simpler, but we can't, because it's just mouse movement, we can't do the keyboard lookup. So we're going to want to go to the drop down next to the keyboard and go mouse, and then mouse XY 2D axis. And then we're going to want to add the negate. But we're not going to uncheck any variable, uncheck anything. So for IA look, we have mouse XY 2D axis, and then we added the negate modifier. And that is our input mapping context, and that's all we need to do to set it up. We good? Alright. Next, I believe that's it for setup. Alright, next we're going to start actually coding. Yeah, fun stuff. The thing is, so Visual Studio by itself does not have the best IntelliSense or the fastest IntelliSense. JetBrains Rider is what I'm going to use, but Visual Studio does work. It has all the same code, just the IntelliSense may be a little different. But some basic things for Unreal Engine coding. All actors will be prefixed with the letter A. So if you make a class called player character, right, that player will be an actor, something you can spawn in the world. But when you reference the class, it'll be a player character. And then U is for pretty much components, mainly. It's U objects. So it's a lot of things, but the main thing is components. F is for structs. So if you create a struct, it'll be named F something. And then E is for enum. So E something is an enum. Oh, and then if you are unfamiliar with Unreal Engine, a basic breakdown is actor, anything that can be placed in the world. A pawn is something that you can place in the world and possess, and then a character is a pawn with movement logic. So if you want something to like walk around, jump, that type of stuff, it will be a character. If you want like a flying orb, that'll be a pawn. Well, if a flying ship or something, that's a pawn. And if it's just like a wall or something, that's an actor. So now we start actually coding. So back in the original view, you're going to go to C++ classes on the left-hand side. And then in that, we're going to go inside Code Workshop. In here, there should be 2 C++ classes already. Don't delete them. That could break things. So we're just going to leave those alone and create our own. So we're going to right-click in this class, in this folder, and do, once it shows up, new C++ class. Alright, and it's going to inherit from character, because we want someone who can walk around. And then we'll go next. And I'm going to name mine just player character. So I'm going to name my class player character. and then just create the class. This may take a bit because it's going to basically... What is open in JetBrains? So this is basically going to compile the code, create the new class, and then open whatever editor is your chosen editor. Alright, so that finished. And I'm now going to open my editor, which is JetBrains Writer. And for JetBrains, you have to say trust and open. So now it'll open, and then after a bit, the IntelliSense will compile, and I'll actually have everything like all colorful, fun, you know. I'm just going to wait for that to happen. Alright, so we're going to start in the playerCharacter.h file. And we're going to set up, so first we're going to add some components to the player. Because we want a string arm and a camera. The string arm is what keeps the camera at a certain distance, but also collides with objects so the camera zooms in. So we want to add these through code in case we need to reference them later. You can also add them through blueprints, it's just more difficult to reference. So, we're going to start with a, real quick. So, for variables and functions in C++ have two different types of identifiers, uProperty and uFunction. A uProperty is used for variables that you want to maybe reference in the editor or something like that. uFunctions are used for, well, functions that you want to reference in the editor. But also some functions require a variable to be a uProperty. So I just kind of add uProperty and uFunction to most things, except for structs. Structs cannot be function, or if a function includes a struct, you cannot make it a uFunction. Not sure why, it's very annoying, but you can't do it. So we're going to start with a uProperty, and then we're going to make it visible anywhere. This makes it so the blueprint can view the property that you are making. Oh wait, and first we're going to add the private tag above it. That way other classes won't be able to call it. So uProperty visible anywhere, and then category equals components. This will make sure that this component is visible in the editor, but also that it is grouped together with other components to simplify the editor view. And then we're going to call it, well, it's going to be a uStringArm component, and then make that a pointer. If you're not familiar with C or C++, that's unfortunate. I don't really want to get into pointers right now. But it's sort of like a reference. So uStringArm component, I'm going to name it stringArm component. Some original naming here. This is also where it is very nice that you have the U and A prefixes. Because you can just name a class something like, you can name a variable the same as a class without it conflicting with the class because of that prefix. And now we're going to do the same for a camera component. Visible anywhere, category equals components, and uCamera component. Camera component. Alright, now for both of these, they are, well, camera component is red because it is not declared. So at the top of our class, before the U class, but after the include, we're going to say class U camera component. This just forward declares. It's basically, I can reference this class, but I cannot use anything in this class. But this is best for your header file because we won't be using stuff in that class yet. And also, it imports less stuff, so it just makes stuff simpler. And then we're going to be doing the same thing for useStringArm component. And then we can delete the game framework StringArm component include at the top. All right. We good?
Visual Studio has decided to update
Ah,
for some reason. So that's where I'm at. I've not done any coding.
how long is the update?
It's like 3 gigs.
Oh.
Apparently I haven't updated in a while.
What about you, Nicholas? You good? Alright. Since 3 gigabytes could take a very long time, I think I'm gonna continue. But there is a workshop form in the Discord, so you can catch up. Because I'll be going through it slower than you can probably catch up. Alright, so in the playerCharacter.cpp file now, first thing is we're gonna want to include and then camera/camera component. This makes it so that in the CPP file, we can actually call those functions attached to the camera component. And then we're going to do the same thing for StringArm, except it's a bit different because it's, I think it's game framework, if I could spell, /StringArm component. So we can actually call functions associated with the StringArm component. Now that we have those two includes, we can add the component functionality. And this will be done in the constructor, so that whenever you create a blueprint, it'll automatically add these things to the blueprint so you can play with them in editor. So constructor is called if you want something to be visible and editable in the editor. Begin play is once you start the game, stuff will happen. So in the player character constructor, we're going to first create the StringArm component. So it's StringArm component equals, and then create default subobject. This is just to create the StringArm component. And then for the class, we're going to do useStringArm component. And then the parentheses is expecting a name for it. So we do text, all caps, and then for the name, I'm going to do StringArm. And then finish it off with a semicolon. Now we created the StringArm component, but we want to attach it to the hierarchy. So we want to do StringArm component, and then set up attachment. And this will be root component. Root component is just the top thing in the hierarchy. So it's basically whatever is the first thing, attach it to that. Okay. I can actually zoom in more on code, so I'll do that. How's that?
What's that symbol for root component?
Oh, that just got auto-added. I didn't type that.
Okay,
It's user-defined conversion of root component from type whatever to type this. So I guess it just tells me the editor is doing something in the background. I don't think you need to worry about it too much. So then we need to set up the camera component. So camera component equals create default subobject, and this time it's a uCamera component, and then text camera. Alright. And this time, instead of attaching to the root component, we're going to be attaching it to the StringArm component. So camera component, setup attachment, StringArm component. And now when you create a blueprint based off this class, it will have a StringArm component and then a camera component shouted to that. And that'll just make sure that when we set up camera rotating functionality, it'll rotate at a fixed distance and zoom in and out based on collisions. How's the update going? Alright, so now that we have that set up, we're gonna set up input. There are a lot of variables we need for input. Well, let me go to the top first. So first, we are going to predefine or for declare U input action. These are the IA look, IA move, and so on. Then we need a class U input mapping context. This is the thing we created that combines all of them. Then we need something a little different. Class U enhanced local player input local player subsystem. It's a long name, but it's something we need.
I finally opened the third project.
Nice. Now catch up.
I just had to download updates for Visual Studio and Unreal.
Very nice, very nice. Very nice, very nice. Alright, so now that we have those four declared, we're going to go down to the bottom. And underneath the private tag, so the way the class is structured is you have the class name at the top and what it inherits from. And then generated body. Don't touch that. Just don't touch that. It creates it? I don't know, really. But it causes problems if you touch it. Yeah. So then you have these tags: public, protected, public, private. Basically, everything between a tag is the top tag is applied. So a player character is a public function. Begin play is protected. Tick and setup player input component are both public. So everything we put below the private will be a private variable or function. So the first thing we're going to add is the mapping context. And this will do edit anywhere instead of visible anywhere. This means we want to edit the value of this in the editor. And then category equals input. This way we can group all the inputs together and have them all nicely lined up. And this will be a U input mapping context default mapping. Why is the errors? Yeah. Huh? I've never opened my command prompt in relation to Unreal. Yeah. Have fun with that. Alright, and now we're going to add the input actions. So, U property, edit anywhere, category equals input, and then U input action, pointer, move action, and then I'm just going to copy and paste this 2 more times because we will have the look action and the jump action. It's kind of annoying having to make variables for each of these, but oh well. I have not found another way to do it, so that is what I do. And then the last thing is a U property. Well, not the last thing. We have U property, and this one will not be visible to the editor. So this one we just say U property, nothing else. And it will be a U enhanced input local player subsystem, and I'm going to call it subsystem. Alright. The next thing is we need a reference to the player controller. So we're going to do U property, again with nothing in it, and a player controller. And then we're going to call it player controller. this is a controller is something in Unreal Engine that is used to possess the actors' pawn. I mean, not actors, but pawns and characters. So this is a reference to whatever is possessing this. Yes, that. Oh, and then at the top of the private list, so above spring arm component, we're going to add 2 functions. And these we will call when we want to move. So we will have a U function with no specifiers, and it will be a void player move, with a const f input action value, and then I think that's actually supposed to be value. All right, const f input action value, and then ampersand. That's what that's called, right? An ampersand. I think that's what it's called. And then value. And then because I remember this, we're going to go to the top, delete the input action value line, and forward declare it. Alright, so now back down here, it has an error, but we're going to ignore that error for now. Then we're going to do a U function, void player look, const f input action value. And I hit enter again, so it added it back to the top. Let me scroll up and delete that real quick. Alright, so down here we have the player move and player look that take in an f input action value. The f input action value is basically what is passed from our input actions. So the header is now all set up for what we need. We're now going to go into the CPP file and add some include statements. So we're going to include input action.h, include input action value.h, include enhanced input component, and I think include enhanced input subsystems. I'm positive about that last one, but I'm going to add it just in case, and then if we don't need it, I'll delete it later. So we now have our include statements for everything. So if we go back to the previous page, there's still, oh did I name it wrong? When I said U input action value, it should be F input action value class. Okay, there we go. Yeah, my bad. So the for declare for input action value should be F input action value because it is a struct and not a U object. So we need to make that fix. Now back in the player character.cpp, we are going to set some things up. First, we're going to do player controller. Oh, this is in the begin play function. We're going to do player controller equals cast a player controller, and then in parentheses controller. So controller is the is attached to the a pawn, and that's just whatever is controlling the player. But we want a specific player controller, so we're going to cast that to a player controller and get that. So then we're going to do if player controller. So this checks to make sure that it is valid, which it should always be valid, but just in case we're going to add the check. Then we're going to do subsystem equals, I need to open code for this. I don't remember how to do this. I think it's, actually, let me guess. Player controller, get map, get input, get subsystem. Okay, I need to open code. Alright, now we're going to open my code because I figured how to do this. So the code is just linked on the thing with the hyperlinks and the headers. Alright, now I open code. It's just text document, which is very annoying to look at. Okay. So, alright, we're going to do off player controller get local player. And then prefacing that, we're going to do u local player get subsystem. And then in the arrow brackets, I don't know what they call it, we're going to convert it to a u enhanced input local player subsystem. Alright, I'm going to put this on 2 lines so you can see everything. Alright, so we have subsystem equals u local player get subsystem, u enhance input local player subsystem, and then in the parentheses, player controller get local player. Does everyone have that? Alright, now we're going to do another if statement. So if subsystem, to make sure it's valid. If subsystem, then subsystem, arrow, add mapping context, and then we're going to do the default mapping, which we made earlier, and then 0, which means it's the first priority. It is the most important mapping context. So yeah, we have now added the default mapping context to our subsystem to make sure input actually works. How are people doing?
I opened my project.
Nice. Alright. Elliot, are you catching up?
Yeah.
Nice. Do you need me to leave this up for another second? Alright. Does anyone have... Yeah.
Did you like type out priority? Because I put it in somewhere and it's giving me there.
Oh, no, I did not type out priority. That's another thing JetBrains just auto-added. My bad. So, basically anything that is not colorful, right? Any words that are colorful, JetBrains auto-add. Alright, I'm going to just wait a second for Elliot to finish up what's on the screen. Carson, how you doing? You following along okay? For our next workshop, I'll make sure part of the workshop is watching me download Unreal Engine so everyone can follow along.
I have it downloaded.
To be fair, I had
It just wouldn't let me launch it,
Mm-hmm.
so I had to download a new version.
Oh, I've done that before. Yeah, it's fun stuff. Yeah, I've broken the engine before. That was the first time I tried to use JetBrains Rider. I did something wrong and it broke Unreal, and I had to re-download it. So yeah, Elliot, you all good? All right, cool.
don't worry, we have this time on Friday.
Very true. All right, so now that we have that is everything we're going to set up and begin play. Next, we're going to go to the setup player input component, and we're going to set up the player input. All right. Excuse me, sorry. So in setup player input component, this is where we bind everything together. So we want an if u enhanced input, yes. No. So we have a u input component, u enhanced input component, and we're going to call it enhanced input component, and then equals, what are we going to do here again? I think we're casting it. Yeah, cast checked. Okay. We're going to do cast checked U enhanced input component. And then I'm running out of space on this line. But U enhanced input component, then parentheses player controller get mapping. No, that's not right. Just player input component, my bad. Player input component, which is just the variable that's passed in this function. So we're casting the player input component to an enhanced input component to make sure we're using the enhanced input system. And I'm going to put this on 2 lines just to make sure that it works, that you can see everything. And we're also declaring enhanced input component in this so that we can use it within the if body. And this will be used to add the mapping, the actions. So enhanced input component, we're going to do bind action. The first thing it'll take in is a reference to the action. So this will be the move action, we're going to say. Then it wants an e-trigger event. This is what you want it to be fired on. You want it to be on start, so when you press the button originally it gets called. Do you want it canceled, so when you release the button it's called. Ongoing, so it's just continually called, I think. And then triggered is whenever it's triggered and then while it's being triggered. I'm fairly certain. So, triggered is what we are going to use. So we have e-trigger event triggered. And then we need a reference to the object it is being called on. So if we have a function that we want to call on ourselves, we say this, which is what we are doing. But we could also call something on another thing. So say you have like UI, right? Or not UI. Say you have a weapon, right? And the weapon has an attack function on it. Instead of this, you can put a reference to that weapon so it'll call the weapon. So it'll pass that input to the weapon. And so then we need the function we want to call. So we do and, or ampersand, a player character, so the class the function is in, and then the name of the class, player move, my bad. And that's the end of the line. Also, ignore the object label, that was auto-added by JetBrains. So, now we have binded the move action to the player move function. Now we're going to do the same with the look action. So we're going to bind action, look action. This will also be a triggered event. Then we're going to use a reference to this, and then a player character, player look, instead of player move. So now we have the look action binded. Lastly is the jump action. This one is a little different. Enhanced input component bind action, jump action, and then e-trigger event, we're going to want started instead. So like as soon as you press down, you jump. Not like while you're holding, you continue to jump or something. And we want a reference to this. And you'll notice that we did not create a jump function earlier. That is because the character class has a jump function built into it, which we can call by a character jump. So now we have bound the jump action to the jump function that is already declared in our parent class. So we don't have to implement any new functionality for jumping. Unless you all want some like custom jump thing or whatever, but that's not what we're doing. Now we need to simply create the functions for player move and player look. So we're going to do void a player character. For all functions you need the class and then colon the function name. So we're going to do player move first. In this, we're going to want to get the f vector to the movement direction from the value. So value dot get vector 2D. F vector 2D, my bad. Alright, and that'll give us the input that we are using. So if we're pressing 1, and the y value will be 1 and the x value will be 0. Well, if we're pressing W, the y value will be 1, x value 0, so on and so forth. Now, we want to do if player controller. If player controller. Then in here, usually movement is based on the camera. So we're going to want to get the camera's forward and right vector. If you don't want it to be based off the camera, you don't have to do this. But what we want is an F vector, and then forward vector equals. This is why we referenced the camera earlier in C++, so we can access the camera. So we want to do Kismetics math library, which reminds me I need an include statement on the top. So at the top we're going to include Kismet math library. And this is just some math functions we can use. Alright, are people good on the include statement? Alright, now back at the bottom, we're going to go back to this and do Kismet math library, my apologies, and then colon, and then get forward vector. This takes in a vector, or it takes in a rotation, my apologies, and gets the forward vector from that rotation. So we want to do camera component get rotation, get component rotation. So now we are getting the camera component's forward rotation, getting the camera component's rotation, and then converting that to a forward vector. That way we know which direction the player should move in. Then we want to do the same thing, but for the right. So when we move to the right. So F vector, right vector, equals U Kismet math library, get right vector, and then camera component, get component rotation. Now we have the forward and the right vectors. Are people good on this? Elliot, Nicholas, all good? Nicholas, you good?
I'm not sure.
Where'd you get caught up?
I've been
Okay, so everyone's good. Alright, now we're going to add movement input. So add movement input is a function built into the APON. I believe APON. Yeah, APON. Okay. And then we're going to pass in the vector we want to move, so forward vector. That's the basis of how we want to move. And then we're going to pass in a scalar to determine how that changes. So we pass in a 1 if you want to move forward, a -1 if you want to move backwards. But we just have it built in to our vector 2D, so movement direction dot y. That'll make sure when we're pressing W, we will move forward, and when we're pressing S, we'll move backwards. Then we're going to do the same thing, but for the right vector. So right vector, movement direction dot x this time. This way, when we move side to side, we move the correct side to side. Okay. Are people good on this? Alright, now we can link up the look. A player character look, player look. Now we're going to want an F vector 2D once again for look direction. equals value.get f vector 2d, and then once again if player controller. This time we do not need to get the camera component rotation. What we're going to do is do add controller yaw input. So rotating around the player is the yaw. And we're going to do negative look direction dot x. The negative, that's just so it'll, when you rotate, it'll be the right direction. And then we're going to do add controller pitch input with the look direction dot y. So this will allow you to turn side to side and also look up and down. Alright, any questions, or is anyone behind or anything? Alright, Elliot, you good? Okay, so that is all. That is all for C++. Now what we're going to do is close Unreal Engine, so we can build from C++. And in C++, if you're in Visual Studio, I think there's just a build button, and then you choose what to build. In JetBrains, I just do Control-Shift-B. And it will build the C++. In Unreal Engine, you can either, for bigger changes, you're going to want to go into... What did I do? Oh, oops. So, back in playerCharacter.h, change input action value to struct instead of class. That's my bad. Because it is a struct, we declare it with a struct, not a class. Yes. So f input action value should be struct, not class. And then now we try. That I just typed a B. Now we try to build again, and hopefully no errors occur this time. All right. So my build succeeded. Quick thing for Unreal Engine. Basically, if you're changing a sizable portion, you're going to want to build from code, which means you have to close the editor, otherwise the build will fail. There should be a build button at the top somewhere. Does it say build anywhere up there? Yeah, that. Are you good on building? Alright, Elliot, what do you say it was? Alright. So at the top it should say build, and then you scroll down in that, and it should say build code workshop or whatever you named the file, right? Okay. Let me know when you get that. It should have like output somewhere. Or there should be like a little bar at the bottom that fills up or something. Is there? Oh, it's gone now? Alright. Did you find the build thing? Alright. What errors are you getting? What?
One of them said this software is using no stored class or type specified.
What does it say? Or where is it? Elliot, what are your errors?
There's 59 of them.
Mm-hmm. What's one of them?
8-player character uses undefined class coding workshop API. Syntax errors, bunch of syntax errors, bunch of syntax errors. Try to open the project to that. It did build, I think. It might just be that Visual Studio's IntelliSense.
Oh, actually, yeah, it may be a thing where you build it in Visual Studio and it tells you there's errors.
When it's actually not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think. Email property warning errors. Error CBO constructor. Find third-person character.bp, third-person character C.
Just try opening it again. Opening the Unreal Engine, I mean.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and see if that. As you can see, here's my one from earlier, coding workshop. Nice. IntelliSense is so great. Oh, when you try to launch it, an error may appear. Just hit OK. You can ignore that. There's some reference to BP player character in there, but I don't know what it is, so I just ignore it. Huh? What do you mean?
Like, you know, in Code Workshop under C++ classes,
Yeah.
player character no longer is there.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, well, it is there. It's just not there. Like, if you open C++, you'll see it. In the hierarchy, I mean. It's just, sometimes it won't show up in the editor. For some reason.
How does that make sense?
I don't know, but it does.
So how can I verify that it's there?
Open one of the other classes.
I'm going to close Visual Studio.
Alright. Actually, I'm just gonna come and look at those things.
Aaron, why did you walk over on this one?
What?
You wanted to this evening.
Okay. None of the other ones are in the player character capacity. So, yeah, just try to move it. And you reopened it after building? Okay. So you're just going to just wait. Alright. I'm going to check out.
I do think it's still just like in the file. It's just not showing in the
Yeah, for me, it's not before what it says. It exists in the hierarchy, but it doesn't. So,
Is it just in Harlem?
And you miss the outcome. Everything
I've done this stuff. Jesus. I have like, yeah, no, it's, I think I said you've got priorities. That's crazy. That's crazy. And that person's that. What?
Maybe Google like thing not showing up or something. Like C++ class not showing up. All right, but I'm gonna continue for a bit, and if we end early, I'll just come over to try and help. All right, so now we're back in the editor. We're gonna want to go to the blueprints class. What the hell? Okay, it's just being slow. Nice. Alright, and in the blueprints class, we're going to right click and do blueprint class. And here you have the common blueprint classes. We want none of those. We're going to hit the drop down, all classes, and type in player character. And this will give us the class we created. So we select it and then name it BP player character. And then hit enter. We now have a blueprint for our player character. Alright, so there are several things we have to do in here. The first thing I'm going to do is set the mesh. So when I click mesh, character mesh, this will take in a skeletal mesh asset. So just something that has bones, something that can move. So on the right side, in the skeletal mesh asset, I'll choose SKM, and I'm going to do Quinn. And then above that, there is animation. So animation mode, use animation blueprint, and then anim class. I'm going to choose the, once it loads, ABP Quinn. This will make sure we have animations. And it'll automatically set up the movement animations and such. So rotation, we're going to need to actually rotate it -90 degrees. And then we're going to move it down -90. No progress, Ellie? Alright. Alright. So, now we have the player mesh inside the capsule, facing the right direction. The arrow shows the forward vector of the player. Is that good? You hear? Alright, so now we're going to hit compile, just because it's good to compile every once in a while. If it'll let me click compile. Maybe. Alright, it compiled. Okay, now we need to set up the inputs. So if you remember, we made a bunch of input variables. Oh, also, if you notice, our two components, spring arm and camera, are right here at the bottom, with camera underneath spring arm. So those were successfully added and can be seen in the editor and can be played with. Then, in BP Player Character, we're gonna want to go to Search for the Details panel and do Input. Because as you remember, we categorized all the input under the input. So now we have a nice list of every input variable we have. So the default mapping, we're going to choose the drop-down and select the IMC default. And then for move action, we're going to choose IA move, look action, IA look, and then jump action, IA jump. So this is just setting the variables for each of those. And then we choose compile. And yeah. Now back on BP Player Character, we're going to click it again. This time, instead of input, we're going to search possess. And as you can see, two things pop up: auto possess player, auto possess AI. So auto possess player, we're going to want to change this to, if it'll let me click the drop down, we're going to want to change it to player 0. This is just if in a single player game, this is the only player 0. That's who we want to be putting input into this player. Alright. And now that we have the possess working, we need to do one other thing. We want to do, I think it's, alright, use, or we're going to search controller this time. And as you can see, there's under pawn, there's use controller rotation yaw. And we're going to want to uncheck that. That way, when we move the camera, the player will not rotate also. So it looks a little more normal, and they're not just like sliding like this. So that is now unchecked. Alright. People good? Alright. The next thing we're going to want to do is go into spring arm component. In a second. Alright, now we're going to want to change the search once it loads. Alright, and we're going to want to change the search to pawn. Maybe. Did it type? Or control? Alright. Pawn, control, whatever. But we use pawn, control, rotation. This is the variable we're looking for, and we want to check it. This way, the spring arm component will rotate as we move the mouse. Alright. Then the last thing we will change before this is a working player is we're going to click on the character movement on the left hand side. This is the default thing added to all characters. And it's how you move around, it's what movement input is calling, and so on. And for this one, we're going to want to search for what's it called? Look. I may have typed too many O's. Yeah. I'm not even streaming the stream anymore. I'm recording it, but I think it's just maybe how long did I type something wrong? Maybe it's not look. Hold up. We're going to wait a second for it to catch up with my typing. Possibly. This is going great. Finally, movement. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot. I am forgetting what this is called. Okay. We're going to search orient. Because we want to orient rotation to movement. That way, we will look in the direction we are walking. Alright. Now, we will compile. The downside to remote desktoping for 2 hours. Once it compiles, we will also save. Did it not? It didn't click compile. Okay. Maybe, yeah. Compile. I didn't know there was a shortcut for compile. Control-Alt is apparently the shortcut for compiling. Alright, now it's compiled. Which means we can go back to the starter map. Possibly. Alright. And, alright, then we are going to add a player start. So on the left-hand side, there may be a place actors panel, and there's player start, and you just drag it in. Or you can hit the box at the top and the drop down. Maybe, and do player start. No, that's just because I recently added it. Basic. Yeah, basic player start. So that's the 2 ways you can add it. So now we have a player start in the level, but we need our guy to actually spawn in. So we're gonna want to go to game default pawn. Oh no. Gonna want to do game pawn. Well, okay. We're just gonna create a new game mode. So we're gonna create, so in BP player character, in the blueprints folder, we're gonna right click. We're gonna right click and do blueprint class, and then game mode base, and call it BP game mode. And then double click it. And the only thing we're changing in here is because is the default pawn class. So this is what spawns in on start. So default pawn class, we're going to choose the drop down next to it and choose BP player character. And then we're going to compile and we're going to save. Alright, how's everyone doing? Alright, thank you. So then, back in the starter map, this little tree thing, we're going to click it and change the project settings. We're going to change the hover over the game mode code workshop game mode, and then change select game mode base class. And we're going to choose BP game mode to make that the new default game mode. Then save. Alright. Now that that's all done, we should now spawn in when we hit play and be able to look around. Slowly. Alright, and then also walk around. Oh my gosh, this is so laggy. But yeah, it should be now fully working. Movement relative to the camera. This doesn't really exhibit that because the camera is moving so entirely slowly. But yeah, that is how to create a... oh, right, I forgot we had a jump. I stopped it already. No? Did I? Jump. Yes. I'm trying to stop the running of the... I love how this is just not letting me stop the... Alright. Now, okay, now it stopped. So that is how you create a basic player movement in C++ with input actions. Thank you.